Hello, Simone. I'm excited to be here with you today. Today, we are going to be talking about Jungian psychology, which people know I am not a fan of, but I want to explain what his psychology is. And it's important to know about because if you are consuming manosphere content, what you may not realize, or even conservative content more broadly, is a lot of conservative intellectuals recycle Jungian theory without telling you that's what they're doing. Famous person for doing this is Jordan Peterson.
Well, Jordan Peterson talks about Jung a lot. I think just not that many people necessarily understand how much Jung has influenced him.
Yeah. And so it's useful to be able to note, call out when you're having Jungian BS thrown at you and to understand why it's wrong. Because a lot of it can sound like, oh, shadow work or something like this. I can see how this is useful. And it's fundamentally bad because it leads you to bad conceptualizations of how your brain works that lead you to psychological places that can be more difficult than they need to be to resolve. So let's dive in. The structure of the psyche in Jung's perspective is that you have the ego, the center of consciousness, your sense of I, identity, and everyday awareness. It is an important part, but not the whole self. And it can become rigid or inflated if it ignores the unconscious. And this is where you talk about people with like an inflated ego. And we'll get to more what he means by this, which, by the way, I think is a very bad way to think about this phenomenon. Then you have the personal unconscious. This contains repressed or forgotten personal experiences, memories, and feeling toned complexes, emotionally charged clusters of ideas like a mother complex or inferiority complex, which we'll get to a lot because these are really important to him. These act asynchronously and can influence behavior strongly. Now, the first thing I need to note, just like before we go farther, is scientifically speaking, to the best of our knowledge in psychology right now, and keep in mind, I am very dubious of psychology as a science, but I am trained enough in it to feel like I have a fairly good understanding of where the BS lies and where things that we've actually pretty much gotten down at this point. And one of the things that it seems pretty reliable at this point is that repressed memories are not a real phenomenon. You do not forget something, have it continue to affect you, and then have it come back later in life. When this happens, it is almost always, in the studies that have like looked at this a lot, one of two phenomenon. Phenomenon one is called forgetting before remembering. So what happens in the phenomenon is somebody will go to their spouse or something like that and been like, oh my God, I just had this memory that came back to me all of a sudden of my father or uncle sexually, essaying me as a kid. And this is horrifying. And then the person who they came to is this will be like, oh my God, that is horrifying. While secretly being like, actually, you talked about that all the time. And causes this phenomenon is they'll remember something like this, but then the context of that memory changes. So they might remember their uncle doing something funny with them as a kid or touching them in a way that they thought was silly or weird or made them a little uncomfortable.
Yeah, like their uncle was always creepy and like did stuff like that.
He did this creepy thing for me, but it wasn't, grape. And then one day they're sitting there and they're like, that was a grape. Oh my God. But because they hadn't remembered it with such a charged word like grape attached to it, they had forgotten the previous times they had remembered it. They had forgotten that that was always in their memory because what they're actually remembering is, I had never remembered that as a grape. I had never remembered my uncle graped me. I had just remembered my uncle did this funny thing to me. So you get enough of a category change that you forget that you had previously always had this in your memory. The second thing is it's an implanted memory. This is when is very famous with hypnosis, but also it can happen with psychologists more broadly, which is to say it's very easy for people to conflate fake memories. People fake memories all the time. Our brain constantly makes up memories. Obviously the
Mm.
famous study that I talk a lot about when I'm talking about AI, when people are like, well, AI makes up how it knows something, and the famous memory blindness studies in humans where you show them pictures of attractive women and then you do sleight of hand and you go, why did you pick this one? And they'll just go on a long rant about why they chose that one, and it was not the one they just chose.
Or even like political ballot choices.
Yeah, yeah. So people will just make up why they made decisions. And this has a big problem with memories, right? Because if you make up, oh, a psychologist walks you through something in a hypnotic suggested state, or they walk you through, well, do you remember this happening? You can think back and create that false memory shockingly easily. It is very, very easy for humans to create false memories. And the reason why I'm so against people who push the idea of repressed memories is because the moment you have this concept and you believe it's real, then you and any culture that stems from you, your kids, everything like that, that you teach about this are very susceptible to this. And this is really bad because this is the core wedge that things like the urban monoculture and cults like Scientology use to drive a wedge between people and their support network, i.e. their families. So if your kids grow up believing in suppressed memories, it's much easier for someone to later teach them. Imagine how mortifying that would be if somebody convinced one of your kids that you essayed them and you didn't. And yet we know from research this happens all the time for people who go visit psychologists and stuff like this.
Well, this was even an issue in the period of the Satanic Panic. All these kids who were like, yeah, I was involved in this horrible stuff. And everyone's like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
This never happened.
And then his final layer here, the collective unconscious, Jung's most distinctive contribution, a deeper universal layer shared by all humans, inherited across generations, not personally acquired. It is like a psychic instinctual reservoir containing primordial images and patterns common to humanity. And he believes that this is like a real physical thing. He's not talking about like pop culture here or something like that, which is obviously stupid and woo, and we would immediately call that out as stupid and woo. But let's go to the ego, because I actually think people might think the ego is the least objective one of these ideas before we get into all the shadow work and everything like that. But I actually think it's the most wrong of his ideas about how the human brain works. And because it's the most wrong, it can lead to, and because it doesn't seem obviously wrong, it can lead to tons and tons and tons of mistakes. And it is seeped into every aspect of our language. He has a big ego, somebody might say, right? And they're literally referring to a psychological theory when they say that. The ego is the center of the field of consciousness, your subjective sense of I, personal identity, will, continuity of time. It handles everyday awareness, decision-making, reality testing, and adaptation to the external world. Jung saw it as essentially but limited. It's like a small island of light in a vast ocean of psychic life. Strengths, it provides focus, stability, and necessity, the center for navigating life. Limitations and risks, the ego is not the whole psyche. If it becomes rigid, clinging too tightly to its current self-image or view, it blocks growth. It becomes inflated, identifying with archetypes, collective ideals, or overly grand self-concepts. It loses contact with reality and deeper psyche. Inflation often feels like godlike certainty or superiority, but it leads to fragility, isolation, or eventual deflation collapse. Jung warned that an inflated ego can become, quote unquote, egocentric and incapable of learning from the past. Now,
wow, these are so many mainstream words. That's crazy. Egocentric was a him, like a Jung thing. Oh my gosh. Yeah,
so,
when I looked him up originally, and I'm wondering if this is something that is accurate. My understanding of Jungian psychology was basically trying to take Freudian psychology, but then build it around the hero's journey and book style narratives. But is that just a misreading of what he
that's
did?
a misreading. He did do that, and obviously Jordan Peterson borrows a lot from that. No, it's a sort of framework for how people think and how to improve how people think. And while the framework has its three core components, the ego, the subconscious, and the like super societal subconscious, the core failure is he basically took Freud's stupidness of like you have the ego and the id, he
Uh-huh.
renamed some stuff and he tried to make
Mhm.
it like less crazy, right?
Yeah.
And the problem with this is, okay, let's take out the thing that seems obviously wrong and objectable, which is like this collective unconscious. Okay. Even
Yeah.
the idea of an ego and an unconscious is not how your brain actually works.
Mhm.
And believing it's how your brain actually works can lead to a lot of mistakes. So,
Mm.
first, your brain does a lot of thought that you are not consciously aware of. This
Yes.
is just an objectively true thing in science and neuroscience. We can measure this, we can look at this, we can see thoughts happening significantly before they enter your field of awareness. As we've pointed out in other videos on this, it appears from the most cutting edge science that and you can watch episodes on this, like Stop Anthropomorphizing Humans, that the most cutting that these parts of your brain that you do not have conscious access to are
Mhm.
likely working with a level of architectural convergence to token predictors for many reasons, and more studies keep coming out showing this, which is really cool that like we made this prediction a while ago, and since then a number more studies have come out that from different angles seem to be arguing that this is the case, or seem to
Yeah.
provide evidence that this is the case. But this unconscious part of your brain then funnels it operates in separation from itself. Like it's fairly regionalized. It's not like you have a unconscious LLM and then a central LLM. You have a dozen bodies of unconscious LLMs which are interacting with each other and then send all of that to a centralized workstation, which is what that centralized workstation then may be conscious, but it's probably also mostly unconscious and you're not aware of it. Then that centralized workstation sends the decision it makes into your conscious mind, and where your conscious mind interacts with it is predominantly through the way it writes your memories. That appears
Mhm.
to be the core focus of the conscious mind, not making decisions, but writing memories. And
Mhm.
how the conscious mind ends up writing those memories, the emotional framing that it puts on them, the contextual framing it puts on them, can end up shaping a great deal of your personality, because those memories are then referenced by the unconscious parts of your mind when they make decisions. Okay. Now, this is the reason why I'm going into all of this is this unconscious part of your mind is not like some mystical wooey whatever. It's just the parts of your thought process that are happening by components in your brain that are not part of your consciousness and are the predominant part of your brain. They are also not held under some secret influence that you're unaware of. When you
Mhm.
talk about like an individual's unconscious mind in like a Freudian sense or something like that, the implication, or the Jungian sense, is this unconscious part of your mind is one completely out of your control, and it's going out there and just like creating ideas based on thoughts that are completely like injected into you by maybe like an advertising campaign or something like that, right? Like
Mhm.
that's how it's typically thought of. Like you had something suggested to you because of some advertising campaign, and then your unconscious ended up making a decision based on that because you were tricked and you didn't even know why you made that decision, when that's not exactly what's happening.
Mhm.
When things like that do happen, it's a lot closer to what I would call an illusion, right? Like you experience an illusion in real time, like an optical illusion in real time, but you don't think it's like your eyes influenced by some like magical thing you can't see. You're like, oh, that optical illusion happens because when my eyes are processing X, they do X in a weird way, and then that hits my brain. So
Mhm.
a lot of like advertising related quote unquote illusions are really just like priming effects. Okay. A priming effect means, by the way, token predictors have priming effects as well, in
Yes.
case you're wondering, very heavily. It means if you want to get somebody to act in a certain way, you prime them with something else, like some concept. Like you want to get them to act more morally, you prime them with the concept of God or something like that. And you can also get like faster response times. Like if you prime them with the concept of red, they'll like say fire truck faster, right? They'll have an easier time passing through that neural pathway. But there's nothing like I guess fancy or secretive happening here. Everything in the output from these parts of your mind, the unconscious mind, is fed into your conscious mind. Your conscious mind can heavily control your unconscious mind, but it still doesn't make decisions. By that, what I mean is you completely control your moral and emotional framing of reality through the lens and context you put onto a story with the part of your mind that is sentient. If you decide, and this is where he gets an element of correctness, where he talks about these societal archetypes being really important to people's egos. Many people will take a societal archetype, define that societal archetype as a life well lived,
Mhm.
right within every memory they have. Did I live up to that societal archetype? It's one way that they may do it. Or they may ask, do other people see me as that societal archetype?
Or essentially you're saying that they're functionally method acting as that archetype. And so when they behave like that,
Well,
sort of
no,
they're
this trains their unconscious brain to method act as this archetype.
mm,
Because their conscious brain is labeling things as good or bad, e.g., other people's perceptions of them, their own actions, their own decisions, based on whether or not they conformed with this archetype.
yeah. And if they're trying to work out how to respond to something, the subconscious thought process is how would a like tough man respond to this versus like how would a a
Yes.
fancy frail delicate desired woman respond to this or whatever, right? That kind of thing.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly. And this is a genuinely, like, when you recognize that you're doing that, or you see somebody who's doing this is a genuinely bad way to live life. And it can
Mhm.
lead people to fail at their lives when they overglom on to these archetypes. But to try to over mythologize what they're doing can miss the banality of it. They simply found an archetype and decided that archetype was definitionally aspirational, and then
Mhm.
attempted to embody the archetype that they saw. And the moment
Mhm.
you realize it's just as simple as that, there is no other fanciness to it, and that their ability to embody the archetype is more encoded in their memories than in their, and that they have control of that. And what I mean when you have control of your memories, I've talked about this on other shows, but it's very important to the sort of Addams family principle, I guess I'd call it. If somebody gives you wilted flowers, Gomez and Morticia are like, oh, they're lovely, right? And culturally, they choose to see them as lovely, right? Culture is in part a choice, but in part, we'll talk about where culture is not a choice, but they, like the Addams family, very intentionally leads into their family's unique culture. And I think when the Addams family is done well, they are not monsters, but they are around a normie society that sees them as so culturally different that they are the equivalent of monsters.
Yeah.
And then they live in a world where monsters also see them as the equivalent of monsters, simply because they're so culturally deviant from the society around them. With the core joke behind all of that in whenever Addams family is done well. But despite all of that, despite doing things their own way, they are fundamentally more loving. They do have a
Mhm.
better sex life. They do have a better relationship with their children, despite inverting. And the Addams family that do this, rest are the full length movies, like Addams Family Values from the 1980s, are just god tier at this.
I hated you.
I despised you.
I choked him until he lost consciousness and had to be put on a respirator.
I tied him to a tree and pulled out 4 of his permanent teeth.
When he was asleep, I opened his skull and removed his brains.
You did?
Brother!
Brother!
And good for teaching
So
kids
good.
this as well.
Mhm.
Which is to say, they can choose. Like when you watch the Addams Family, yes, there's like some supernatural stuff and stuff like that, but the vast majority of what they do, you could just decide to do. You could decide to treat your relationship the way that they treat their relationship. You could decide to treat disappointment and death and the macabre as things that are positive to you, because it fundamentally, other than a few hard-coded things, we get to decide how we react to our experiences and our history. And it matters a lot that you understand and incorporate this into the core of who you are. The reason I say this is a great study that was done on this. It was actually a series of, I think, 4 studies, so it's been pretty well replicated at this point, that shows that if you ask somebody about whether or not they experienced trauma when they were growing up, how much trauma they say they felt growing up is perfectly correlatory with all the negative effects of that trauma. What is nearly uncorrelated is whether or not they actually experienced any trauma as a kid. If you go to the court records and stuff like this, this is not correlated with the effects of trauma. So the effects of trauma are caused by believing that you had these traumatic experiences, right? This is why it matters so much how we encode things. You can choose. There are people who genuinely were heavily abused as a kid, but if they don't believe, if they didn't interpret that as traumatic, which I would be seen as one of those people, right? Like in the Stephen Molyneux debate, he got really into this. Like, how can you not say that you were in a highly abusive situation growing up? And I was like, because I choose to not see it that way. Right? I choose to not see that about my childhood. I choose to not believe that about my childhood. I choose to believe the best about any situation that I'm in. I have been in really terrible situations in my life. And as Simone knows, I always frame them positively as an opportunity, right? Like we don't have jobs right now, and yet I frame it as an opportunity to try to build our next thing that I'm excited about. And I'm excited every day. I could be moping and worried, right? That is fundamentally a choice. And when you don't frame it that way, when you frame the unconscious as something that is fundamentally outside of your control, it leads to cognitive abdication and working on all of these things that don't really matter and avoiding all these things that don't really matter. But now let's go to what he thinks of the personal unconscious. This layer sits just below the consciousness and contains material that was once conscious, but has been forgotten, repressed, or never fully noticed. This is not how your unconscious mind works. You're actually largely aware of most of, at least the consequences of what goes on in your unconscious mind and your decision process. It is personal and shaped by your individual life history, experience, and environment. So you can see why I push against this. This is just not the way unconsciousness actually works. Unconsciousness is just like the line a thought takes before it gets to your consciousness.
Right. What let me be clear here. What you're implying, at least per this language, is that he thinks that there are memories that we don't remember, but that affect our behavior. Whereas in reality, if there's a memory you don't remember, or like you haven't retrieved it in a long time, it is not going to be influencing your behavior.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that is correct. This also doesn't heavily influence things like arousal patterns from the studies that we've done on this, like being spanked as a kid. In our study, we couldn't find good correlation with that in like anything sexual. So a lot of people think that a lot of these like experiences that they've had, there's been great studies on grape in this. So when people are girls specifically are graped, in societies where there's a big stigma around grape has a really huge negative effect on their cognition. But in societies like, say, Islamic society, where it's more common, it does not have a particularly big effect on their cognition. Being graped does not psychologically hurt them that much because of how they contextualize it. Grape isn't bad because of grape. Grape is bad because of how we psychologically contextualize what that means to an individual.
Okay, that's not the right phrasing. It's not mentally traumatic or harmful to people because of the event itself.
Aspect of it.
And the same can be said for like experiencing violence as a child or other things like that. And that's what the research shows. And this is not a judgment on the morality or goodness or badness of the actions of the trauma that you might experience, be it of that sort or just like, witnessing a terrible accident. But what matters is the contextualization. If you contextualize it as this horrible thing happened to me. I am now damaged goods, or I am now traumatized. I am now never going to be able to function again as a normal human. That is how it is damaged. And this shows up in even more innocuous things. We've talked about this ad nauseum, but people who've undergone formal sleep studies who have had horrible sleep, but don't know that, and they report to researchers, I think, I slept fine, feel better and perform better throughout the day than people who, per actual research, like measured sleep, slept really well. But
and
believe they
you can
slept
actually
horribly.
get most of the effects from sleeping differences just by telling someone, we measured your sleep last night and you slept well, and then they'll perform better on a test.
Yeah.
Like,
So really, like, even with, so it could be with something as serious as some form of assault, or it could be as something innocuous as, believing you had a good or bad night of sleep. How you contextualize things is really important. Someone joked in our comments when we talked about this in a recent episode. They were like, man, how do we get like our Fitbits to gaslighting us into thinking we have good health? Which is a legit good question.
No, but where this ends up mattering, and it explains why, if it, like, the more progressive somebody is, the worse their mental health is and the more depressed they are, is in part because you can choose to contextualize. Like, there are types of like light essay, right, that may happen as part of like regular life, and a conservative woman or man, or let's say discrimination, right, may be affected by one of these things and just rub it off as a normal part of life, right? Whereas a progressive, because they contextualize it as equivalent to grape, or because they contextualize it like this incredibly, what they might call a microaggression, but it's just somebody being like, what bathroom is the right one for you again? Because they contextualize this as an attack, they feel it as an attack, and it has the same effect on them, not just psychologically, but physiologically as an attack. But to continue here, he believes in this concept that affects the personal unconscious that we'll get to a second, called autonomous complexes. So he says, quote, the image of certain psychic situation, which is strongly accented emotionally and is moreover incompatible with the habitual attitude of consciousness, this image has a powerful inner coherence. It has its own wholeness, and in addition, a relatively high degree of autonomy, so that it has the subject to control the conscious mind to only a limited extent, and therefore behaves like an animated foreign body in the sphere of consciousness. So essentially, to word this in another word, he sees the unconscious mind as like a separate mind from your conscious mind that interacts with your conscious mind, instead of a collection of components that is part of the pipeway into your conscious mind. So you can think of your conscious mind. Okay. He basically thinks of the mind as working like two living blobs, right? Whereas a better way to think of the mind is a series of action calls where you have a thought is written by the conscious mind into memory. Then your unconscious mind, like, responds to that. It's like, okay, I just had X memory. What do I do next? And it does whatever it wants to do next. And that thing happens in the world and then also enters.
I think I have a better analogy. So per Jung, our conscious mind is the president and our unconscious mind is the deep state. So the president is like, we're going to do this. And then the deep state is like, actually, for all these rules and other things that you can't even see and that are super obscure,
yeah,
we're going to actually do this totally differently. And then, things get botched and don't go according to plan. And Jung is trying to say, you must understand the deep state. You must fuel the deep state. You must, ride the deep state. Whereas I think non-Jungian people are like, no, let's just do what the Trump administration does and write a bunch of executive orders and go without all of this nonsense. No baggage.
Okay, here's a better way to describe
it.
It's not as accurate a metaphor, but it's a pretty good one for visualizing. What it actually is closer to a train track with light on one section of the track.
Okay.
Like the light's only covering 12% of the track. Now, it's still all of the same process. It's all the same track. When the track goes through the part that you have conscious access to, it's then going around the track. But you're seeing the whole train, right? Does that work better for you?
No, I don't understand that at all. But,
Okay, I'll continue to go here, and because we'll come back to this in different words, and it might make sense to you then. In plain
Yes.
terms, complexes are emotionally charged clusters of ideas, memories, and associations. A mother complex, which might involve intense feelings around nurturing, dependency, or authority figures rooted in early experiences. They have a quote unquote nuclear core.
Wait. So the whole complex, just the complex, like you have a savior complex. Like when people say things like that, they're referring to Jungian psychology.
Yeah. They're referring to
God.
Jungian psychology, which is not scientific, by the way. It's not like there's not scientific evidence for this. Now, it is true that we have tropes within our society, and some people attempt to embody those tropes, as I've said above. But that attempting to bond to a trope is intentional on behalf of the individual. People are not aware that they are doing this. They may contextualize it differently. Like, of course, I want to be a good progressive, and progressives are good, so I go out and save the environment. They don't critically ask, well, are they actually good? Is this actually a good way to structure my life? But they're not like lying about what they're doing. If that makes sense.
Yes, absolutely.
I got really lightheaded all of a sudden.
No, you okay? Need to take a break?
No. Young. What was I just saying?
That when people are putting on an affectation or character, it is known by them and intentional. They've intentionally chosen to be the ditzy Barbie girl or the high school jock type.
Yeah, the reason why this is important is, and no, they may contextualize. Like, they may act in a way that you see as the mean cheerleader when they think that's how a popular girl acts.
Right.
But this is not, and it's very important, the people who are like, oh, this is like something happened to them when they were a kid and they picked up this unconscious belief in whatever. It's really important that you don't get sucked in by this type of language or explanation, because it's just wrong, and it is hugely disempowering to the individual in a way that can prevent actual solutions from taking place. So how do I explain this? If you buy into his world perspective, you can easily come to believe something like, oh, my friend does X because they have a mother conflict, which they got in childhood for this just so story. And that's a bad thing to believe, because that's not why your friend is doing X. Your friend is doing X because they want to be seen in X way, because they believe X way being seen is good. Now, what's important is once you understand this, now it's a lot easier to work on helping them, right? Because now all you need to do is explain or break through to them why believing that X thing looks good or makes them look good is a bad and inefficient idea that is functionally not working. May you be unable to do that because of something that happened in their childhood? Absolutely, you may be unable to do it because of something that happened in their childhood. But that doesn't mean that like it's some secret magical thing that got stuck in their unconscious. It just means that their framing of those definitions happened in their childhood. Does that make sense, Simone?
Yes.
Okay. When one of these complexes is triggered, they possess you temporarily, he says. You react with disproportionate emotion as if an inner foreign body has taken you over. You might suppress them with willpower, but they return stronger until integrated. And your goal is to work through these complexes via analysis, dreams, or reflection. Released energy and other things can foster growth. And you can see this is where the woo comes in, right? Like, it's actually very, very similar to Scientology, this belief that you have thetans that you get because of bad things that happen. This is what Scientologists believe. Bad things that happen to you as a child, which are the souls of angry ghosts, dead aliens, and they attach to you. And this is why, kids can't even hear like screaming when they're born, because that may distress them, and then they'll pick up thetans, and those thetans will lead to bad things in their life.
Beings born on this planet have had clusters of thetans attached to their bodies. OT3 can run out these clusters and cause them to leave us and reincarnate as individuals.
After hours of expensive auditing, you are rid of the body thetans attached to you. You may then acquire psychic powers, move objects at a distance, and have out-of-body experiences. If you find you can't, then you must take the course again. for another £5,000.
That's basically what Jung thought. That's how he thought reality worked. Thetan logic is that you get possessed by these little anima that live within you. Very video gamey, actually.
Yeah, you're right.
You can't be serious. Now come at me. No one's gonna stop me now.
What the hell? What's up, yo? Now come get some.
There's a game called Persona 5 where you sort of have these, where you have these like anima inside you. And I think this is influenced by Jungian psychology. The idea that you have these ideas about what is good that live inside you and can take you over. That's not really how it works. Now you can be like, but sometimes around specific archetypes, I have seen people get triggered. And it's, yes, sometimes people are triggered by specific archetypes. This absolutely can happen. But sorry, my feet were getting cold. People can get triggered by archetypes, but this is just like a known archetype that they have chosen to incorporate in their self-identity. So how does the flow of emotions actually work? Because we talk about this in the Pragmatist Guide to Life, and it's really important to understand. So most people are living on autopilot. So the sentient part of their brain, the like one little important part, is completely on autopilot. And this sentient part of their brain is, so after you get in an argument with somebody, you may attempt to model them, right? You'll do something like, say, like you're creating an emulation of them within your mind so you can continue to have that debate that has their characteristics and stuff like this. And this is called a theory of mind. And I believe that the way that most humans operate is they have one theory of mind in their brains at all time dedicated to themselves. To the person,
what they believe to be themselves.
Yes, they have chosen to be or become. And this theory of mind is referenced by the little sentience inside of them when they're on autopilot. So by this, what I mean is they have an idea of who is Malcolm, right? Like what is Malcolm like? And they create a model for that. And then the little part of their brain that writes down their emotions was like, are you angry about this? Is this good for you? Is this whatever? It references that theory of mind, which is talking about yourself when you're going to experience an emotion. So suppose you're like going through a breakup, like somebody's just texted you and said, I want to break up with you, right? Your sentient part of your brain references the part of your brain that's the Malcolm or Simone theory of mind and says, how do I feel about being broken up with? And then that theory of mind tells them Malcolm, the type of person Malcolm is, feels like X or Y when they're being broken up with. And that gets encoded. Now you can override this, but it's mostly running automatically. And we argue in that book, the core way to change your emotional reaction is both through recontextualization, we talked about before, but also chiseling at and working on that theory of mind that is you, right? The one that's constantly referenced by your autopilot. And I note here that this theory of mind can come in one of two forms. And you, throughout your life, will meet people of both forms. In one form, it's modeling themselves from their own perspective. These are people who are, this is the normal way of doing it for like non-super toxic people. In the other type of person, it models it from the perspective of outsiders. And these people are very dangerous. So what I mean by that is, suppose somebody has just broken up with it, right? The question that the thing constructing the theory of mind of them is asking is not what type of person am I and how does that type of person react? What type of person do I want other people to see me as, and how does this person react? And so these people become very performative in this sort of stuff. And the reason why this is so toxic is because they can never really be satisfied, right? Like they never really are seen enough as what they want to be like. But to continue here, the collective unconscious. This is a deeper universal layer beneath personal unconscious. It's not acquired through personal experiences, but inherited as part of our psychic structure, like instincts or biological predispositions, but psychic in nature. This one is really stupid. I mean, like, obviously it doesn't exist. If it did exist, we would see it in like feral children and stuff like that. So, but we've seen a lot of children who have been raised outside of families and stuff. We've seen art from people who's been like totally isolated their entire lives, and it's just disordered. There isn't like some sort of recurring thing to it outside of what we biologically inherit from our ancestors. Any thoughts before I go further, Simone?
No. But this has been a lot better than the summaries I've read. So I appreciate you trying to explain this, at least in terms I can understand.
Yeah. Then within the collective unconscious, you have archetypes. And he sees it as being like primordial images that are not fixed images of or characters, but underlying forms of potentials that shape human experience, appearing in myths, fairy tales, dreams, arts, religions across cultures.
This is where I got that perception that it was basically just psychology, but with like some kind of like through the lens of book narratives.
Yeah. And as I've pointed out, the reason I say that this is bad is, while it is true that you do get some convergent phenomenon between cultures, especially cultures that are inheriting from each other, narrative flows, structures, and histories, El Revos and all that, now that I'm playing more stories with Reality Fabricator, I'm realizing just how much AI chooses El Revos as a name. It chooses it well over half the time, which is, maybe I play too many sci-fi stories.
Yeah, in sci-fi stories, that's the case. It's certainly not the case in like historical fiction, which I also choose a lot.
My favorite sci-fi story to play here is I play it with the new like build your own one where it like makes up an inventor concept based on a gist of an idea you have. I am an ambassador for the Terran Empire meeting with the Federation, which are humans who have sort of evolved into this sort of gay space communism utopia, and my job is to infiltrate and take down these witless Federation members, to eradicate their colony for further expansion of the Terran Empire.
So anyway, these archetypes.
Yeah, okay, these types. So they include things like the persona, the social mask or role we present to the world, useful for adaptation, but problematic if we identify it completely. So note here, when I talk about persona, like the thing I'm talking about, you can be like, but that's very similar to a persona. And that's the trick. It sounds similar, but it's a completely separated concept. I'm literally just saying people identify tropes as good and attempt to build them into their self-identities. It's not part of a collective unconscious. It's based on things they saw in their lives and then attempted to model, okay? When people try to live out the hero's journey, that's just because they have seen it that many times in books, especially in the West. The shadow, and we'll talk about this one a lot, the repressed disavowal aspect of personality, what we don't want to be. It includes negative traits, but also hidden strengths and creativity. Anima, in men, the inner feminine image, qualities, soul, emotion, relatedness. Animus, in women, the inner masculine images, quality, spirit, logic, assertiveness. And the self, the central archetype of wholeness, the regulating center of the entire psyche, not the same as the ego. It often appears in dreams as madless, wise figures or symbols of unity. The self guides the processing of becoming who we truly are. Other common archetypes include the hero, the mother, the child, the trickster, the wise old woman, etc. And those are just tropes. They're just tropes that people see and then identify moral value to. As to how you should actually build yourself, if you're like, well, what trope do I choose? Or what trope is really me? And the Pragmatist Guide to Life, you should get it, read it. We argue first you decide what has purpose, then you decide what trope, if you embodied it, would best maximize that purpose, then you embody that trope. That's the best way to live, because then you can live with maximum efficaciousness throughout your life in like a big way, which I'm a big fan of.
Yeah, absolutely. I also would just argue that the hero's journey is just kind of a reflection of common life pathways,
Yeah.
it's
You're
not
growing up, being a
something very-
teen, going out, then
Yeah.
creating a story of success or a story of challenges and failure. That's the way people like to tell narratives and
Yeah,
stories.
life happens. You leave home. You face challenges. You grow. No, that's
Yeah.
profound. I mean, it is, but it's not. Don't overthink it. There's a lot of overthinking, it seems, in Jungian psychology, which ironically I first heard about when I did that internship with the fake cult. The Jejun Institute, as they called it, was like all about like Carl Jung this and Carl Jung that. And I just love that, like, aesthetically, when a bunch of alternate reality game narrative writers decided that they were going to create a cult and try to throw in all these things that like were creepy. So alongside things like human dolphin communication, they threw in a bunch of references to Carl Jung. I think goes to show you everything you need to know about just how useful and real worldish his.
But the reason this gets to me before we go further with shadow work and the shadow is it's just not accurate. It's an inaccurate view of who you are. And it
Yeah.
includes many elements like, past events living in your unconscious or something
Yeah.
that can be used by your ironically real subconscious mind, e.g., the little model that you've built of yourself to justify actions that you wouldn't want, right?
Yeah.
If you believe that you have trauma, then you build that trauma into that model of yourself,
Yeah.
which determines how you emotionally react to stimuli in your environment.
Leads to suboptimal reactions and less resilience.
Yeah, because you're like, oh, I am someone who is traumatized. It is the very belief in the concept of trauma that makes you susceptible to trauma in the first place.
And I'm not up for this because I'm traumatized. Instead of I can do this, I'm empowered. I can do whatever I want
It's
to.
not just trauma. It's the entire world of the unconscious that allows for these justifications to be built within an individual.
Well, it seems to create an external locus of control by creating this subconscious that supposedly drives so much of your action, disempowers you as a conscious individual because it says, well, you're not really in control anyway. You're being controlled by repressed memories and all these things that happen to you over which you have no control, which leads ultimately to a much less efficacious, successful, and happy life. Not good.
Yeah.
Time out though. It looks like you're about to pass out also. I need to get the kids. Should we finish this tomorrow?
Oh, yeah. I just started on shadow work, so we'll finish it tomorrow. Sorry.
And are you okay? Because you look like you're like...
I don't know. I'm feeling off, like really drowsy.
That happened really suddenly. Are you not sleeping enough, or is there something like? Do I need to take you to an emergency room?
No, I'm fine. I'm not sleeping. I have so much to do. I've got to make a fix right now.
Malcolm, no, you. I think you need to take it. Like even a short nap makes a huge difference for you.
Yeah, but if I take a short nap now, then I'm not going to be able to get to sleep later.
Well, that's okay. You have a weird schedule. You can keep a weird schedule. Okay. Can you? Because you just don't. You look off, right? Like you can't work right now. You clearly need to take a nap, or I need to take you to a doctor. Like it's one of those two.
I just need some beer. That's what I need.
No, you don't. Are you okay? Is this normal tired, or is this I need to take you to a doctor tired?
No, this is a feeling I get when I'm in a car and I have to concentrate for a long period of time, and then I get like.
Yeah, it looks like that. Okay, then.
But I'm just doing that with episodes because
Please take a nap.
Thinking for too long.
Yeah, that's okay. Look, you need your glymphatic system.
But the bigger problem is I've got all of these things in the back of my head that I'm worried about, like the board meeting and the site having issues right now, and us doing investor outreach.
Yeah, I get it. But I think then you need to shut down, let the waste matter clear out, and you'll feel a lot better, even if it's just 15 minutes. Can you do that for me?
Yeah, but if you don't know what she's talking about, when you go to sleep, your glymphatic cells shrink, which allows them to clean out the waste matter in between them, which is why short naps can be useful for brain health.
Okay, you need to...
me when I concentrate for too long.
Yeah, well, he both seems to accumulate waste matter in his brain much more quickly, or like it just blocks up more quickly, but then naps clean it out much faster.
Yeah, so
Like
I
I
like
need,
pass out if I concentrate for
and he
too
gets
long.
like 30 minutes and he's fine.
And we did 2 episodes in a row, and it was a really long one before this. Interestingly, the one we had done before this was Tucker Carlson, which has already gone live, and it has one of our lowest like to dislike ratios. It was only 80% likes. Usually we get around 99% likes. And this is weird for me because almost none of the comments were negative, which leads me to believe, is this all bots? Like, is the whole Tucker Carlson situation just maintained by angry bots?
Yeah, so Malcolm, please, in like 2 hours, I'll bring it to your room, but sleep, okay? I love you. Be safe. Good God.
So now we're going to go into Jung again, and this time we're going to be talking about the
Jung
shadow.
again.
So Jung described the shadow as an unconscious aspect of the personality the conscious ego does not identify with or want to acknowledge. It encompasses repressed ideas, instincts, impulses, weaknesses, desires, and traits that feel incompatible with our self-image or societal expectations. In simpler terms, it's the dark side of who we are. Not necessarily evil, but everything we push into the unconscious because it doesn't fit our ideal self, the persona or social mask that we present to the world. Jung famously called it the thing a person has no wish to be. The shadow isn't just bad qualities like anger, jealousy, greed, or selfishness. It also contains positive elements, hidden talents, creative impulses, realistic insights, normal instincts, and strengths that were repressed, e.g., because they seemed, quote unquote, too much or inappropriate or undervalued in childhood or culture. And so what Jung wrote of shadows is everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is. So if I'm going to explain this in different words, what Jung believed is that you had this, as we've talked about, people really do this. They build sort of a trope into their model of who they are that they use to determine what emotions they feel in relation to what decisions and environmental stimuli that they end up making. But to Jung, this meant that you had another you that was also you that had been pushed out of that ego or the persona that you're trying to embody. The problem is that's just like not the case. Like one, it doesn't really show up in research, but two,
the closest thing I think it could come to, but it's still too much of a leap for him. Like I even think I can give him credit for this, is that people are afraid of becoming their parents and then they become their parents. And that's kind of what feel like this rhymes with, but I don't think he even got that far.
No, yeah. So the problem is, and the reason why it's a fairly toxic concept, is the moment you accept the shadow, the unconscious, any of these things, you
could call it the young conscious.
Yes, yeah. You also accept, as he does, this idea of repressed ideas, instincts, etc. And when you accept that, you allow that to manifest in yourself. Because accepting that something is a concept allows this image of you. Remember I said there's like the trope of you that is creating this mental model that you've created of yourself to adopt those traits. And it will adopt this shadow self as a component of itself, which is one of the problems with these ideas, is somebody will have had them for a long time and tell me, Malcolm, but I experience all these things. And I'm like, of course you experience them. The moment you accept them, they are then able to build into your self-identity. If you steel yourself against them as real, just not real concepts, as silly as supernatural things, then they can't affect you in the same way. So to continue here. And if you're like, oh, but why is it so? Because this is like, while it may not have the same word as trauma, it basically implies trauma. It's trauma was a nicer word. It's something that happened to you as a child, changed your self-perception, right? And changed your ability to accept certain things about yourself. When the reality is yes, it's true that things that happen to you in a child can affect this adult self, but the way that they affect your adult self is by affecting the type of person that you want to be, and the type of person you have crafted the mental model of yourself that's always running and judging like what emotions you should feel to things that mental model embodies.
Well, and even more simply, he just gives a ton of excuses to develop an external locus of control.
Exactly.
It's not my fault. It's my repressed memories. It's my shadow self. It's the collective unconscious. It's just like, oh, everything's anyone else's fault but yours. You're not responsible for your own actions, so don't worry about it. Just see your therapist more.
Well, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why this is really dangerous in like right-wing spaces and stuff like that, and manosphere spaces, and why I push against it so much within these spaces. Anything that attempts to overcomplicate how your thinking works in a big way, especially if it can be used to externalize responsibility for your own mind. Like, what could be worse than externalizing responsibility for your thoughts?
For real.
You are not responsible for your own thoughts.
Yeah, so bad. It's so bad.
But to continue here.
Yes.
How do shadow forms operate? Formation. As we develop our conscious identity, ego, and persona, we repress or split aspects of ourselves that don't align with what family, society, culture, our ego ideal. And I love that this is where he gets something right. People do separate out aspects of potentially their capabilities. Like maybe there's something that they're uniquely good at, like music or something like that, or something that they really enjoy. Now, this could be due to like biological tendencies or something like that, right? Like they just happen to enjoy this, but they think that they shouldn't lean into that thing, and they might build that into their self-conception that we've talked about in a way that it doesn't need to. But this isn't what he's talking about. He's covering that, but then he's adding all of this extra stuff. Then you get projection, a key mechanism. We often see our own disowned traits in other people. What we strongly dislike, judge, or react to in others is frequently a mirror of our shadow. For example, somebody who prides themselves in being always kind might intensely criticize selfish people while unconsciously harboring selfish impulses themselves. And again, this isn't a trait that you need to have. If you believe that people have this trait, you may adopt it. But I have lived my entire life, and I feel like I am an exceptionally good at reading people person. And the vast majority of people just don't do this. They will have traits in other people that trigger them, but those traits aren't exactly an inversion of traits that they secretly have in themselves and don't want to.
That runs sort of contrary to everything we understand about, I don't know, biology, psychology, sociology.
Yeah, the only time where you really see something, I think, kind of like this that I do see is like the closeted gay person who is extra critical of gay people, which is a phenomenon that you see. But I don't think that that's because of this. I just think that sometimes if there is something that you struggle with yourself, whether it's gayness, or in this case, it could be greed or anything like that, and you don't like that aspect of yourself, being reminded of that aspect of yourself
makes you kind of mad.
People is going to create negative emotions within yourself.
I think it's simpler than that, which is that we frequently like to talk about how much we love this concept of offense. You only feel offended when something incredibly threatens your worldview. And when you experience something, let's say you're same-sex attracted and you experience other same-sex attracted people and feel this underlying sense of attraction yourself, it credibly threatens your worldview. I'm a straight guy. I feel threatened because right now I feel slightly aroused at this thing, or like I, kind of feel this pull to this group that I know that's not part of my identity. And then you get really angry, you get offended, and that's what's showing up. I don't think it's like some kind of opposite reaction thing showing up. It is someone being offended and acting like someone offended.
Yeah. And I think that that's just really, you don't need all of this extra idea like a shadow self to understand why if somebody's struggling with something and they see somebody else, especially somebody caving to it. Think of it like this, somebody's an alcoholic or something like that, and they're trying to get over their alcoholism. So they have an impulse and they're struggling to resist that impulse. And then they see somebody around them indulge in drinking with apparently no consequences to them, right?
Yeah.
Like, obviously that's going to make them angry, right? Like that's going to create the anger emotion, but that you don't need the whole concept of a shadow self to explain that.
Yeah. No, I think overall Jungian psychology is the kind of thing, we've talked about this in other episodes, where it really appeals to mids and people broadly who it doesn't quite make sense to them, but because it doesn't make sense to them and they're sufficiently intelligent to be able to parrot it, they think that it also won't make sense to other people. And those other people won't, they'll just take their word for it of like, oh, well, I guess that person's smarter than me because I don't understand this. And they're talking about it very confidently. And therefore they, they win this dominance game. When in the end, I think most people who are proponents of Jungian psychology don't understand it and just think it makes them look smart. Does that make sense?
Yeah. By the way, I should also explain our theory on anger. Anger is actually a very similar emotion to surprise. Anger is what is created in your brain when something doesn't happen as you expect within a negative context. So this is, in this case, it would be you have an expectation of the type of person you are, and you are reminded that that is not accurate, and that creates surprise with a negative contextual framing. So you feel anger. Or somebody treats you in a way, this is how you get like anger loops between two groups, where a trans person goes up to an extremely religious Christian person, and the extremely religious Christian person generates anger because this person is labeling themselves in a way that they don't expect, and it creates surprise to them in a negative context. And then the trans person expects to be gendered correctly, and the Christian person isn't doing that, so then they get mad at them, which creates further surprise in this other population because they didn't expect, even on top of all that, this person's getting mad, and then you can get anger cycles really easily. And it's important to be able to understand like what causes emotions exactly, because as soon as you can put your finger on this is, and you'll really see this purest form of anger when you experienced anger due to attempting to do something mechanical that doesn't work out the way you expect it to. This is like you run code and it ends up not working, or you click a button and it doesn't do the thing you expect it to.
Or your earphones get yoinked out of your ears by something if they're wired.
Yes.
That unique rage, you're like, oh.
Yes, the unique rage.
It's so stupid because it doesn't hurt, but it's so rage-inducing.
But you see what I mean? There's no reason with most other explanations of anger that would induce anger. But when you understand that anger is just a negative contextualized surprise, you're like, oh, that's why I get angry out of nowhere when I stub my toe. I have no reason to be angry when I stub my toe or step on a Lego, right? And yet those are some of the highest levels of anger you will experience in your entire life. But anyway, I'll note here that there is another category here where it can be so negative that it just creates shock. This is like having your arm shot off or something, but this isn't exactly anger. This is more like a specific mental state associated with shock. Anyway. And note here, once you understand where an emotion's coming from, you can change it. Like the moment you understand, oh, I'm only feeling anger because X, then instead of accidentally taking it out on the people around you, nothing is worse than the person who stubs their toe and then yells at somebody else, like, why did you leave the door like that, right? Because that's instinctively what an individual wants to do. Like, that's how your system works. But when you understand, oh, the anger is working like this, I can't let it hijack me. I cannot allow my brain to be hijacked by something so basal. To continue here, let's talk about shadow work.
Oh, God. Do we have to? Oh, this sounds so terrible already.
The process of becoming aware of and accepting and assimilating the shadow is central to an individual. Jung's term for the individualization. Jung's term for the lifelong journey towards psychological wholeness and becoming one's true self. Jung outlined a rough approach, not a rigid technique, as it's highly individual, like diplomacy. Accept it exists. Take it seriously and recognize the dark aspect is real and present within you. This requires moral effort and honesty, he would say. Now, do you see immediately why I hate the concept of the shadow? If the shadow doesn't exist, if thing number one is to accept that you have this problematic thing within you, now you begin to model yourself as having this thing, and you manifest it within you where it didn't exist beforehand. become informed about its qualities. So now you're moldering on it. Oh, that's wonderful. Observe your moods, emotional triggers, fantasies, impulses, dreams, and strong reactions to others. Journaling, dream analysis, and active imagination. Discuss dialogue with inner figures help. What? This is purely masturbatory and not very useful, right? You can have internal dialogue conversations to help yourself work through questions that you have about reality in the world or anything like that, right? But they should be goal directed, not to actualize, right? And what you're seeing here is sort of like proto actualization he's describing.
Mm-hmm.
Negotiate and integrate through ongoing conscious engagement. Bring these parts into relationship with the ego. This doesn't mean acting on harmful impulses blindly, but owning them, understanding their origin / energy, and channeling them constructively, e.g. turning repressed aggression into healthy assertiveness. But you don't even need to have the repressed aggression. You can just decide not to have the aggression. Like there are certain impulses that you will feel, but you feel them because you have chosen to build a model of yourself which reacts to specific, and when it's not an innate thing, like say anger or something like that, with is that stimuli. And even when it is an innate thing, you can enact conscious control to sublimate it. You, at the end of the day, always have control of your emotions. And I'll note here that the worst thing you can have in your life is somebody who affirms emotional states in yourself that are negative and not useful for your objective function or life purpose.
Yes.
So if you go to somebody and you're like, or you have a friend and they stoke, they're like, yeah, you really like, suppose you're a wife right now and you have a group of friends. And that group of friends is like, oh yeah, you're really justified in being mad at your husband for doing this, right? That is highly toxic. Like, get away from them, because then you will have more of these negative emotions if they're affirmed by your community like that, or by a psychologist or any environment, right? Whereas negative emotions, where I'm saying negative here, are emotions that hurt somebody's ability to achieve. So they might be positive feeling in them. A lot of emotions that we describe as negative feel really good, like revenging.
Oh, yeah. Well, or at least we'll say the word might be righteous indignation instead. That feels really good.
Righteous indignation feels good. And so when you have this and then somebody else affirms it in you, that is really negative. And keep this in mind with your larger friend groups. Guys do as well. Do you have a friend group who, when you're like, my partner did X to me or Y horrible things, if this ever comes up, now this rarely comes up in male friend groups, do they say, well, here's a plausible reason why this could be a misunderstanding, blah, blah, blah? Or do they say, wow, you're really justified in being angry right now, because then you'll get angrier and angrier and angrier. And if you focus on yourself in the moment, whenever somebody has done this to you, affirmed a negative emotion, I'm sure people have noticed that's when anger or sadness often begins to spiral out of control.
Actually, here's an interesting just side note on women in groups and mate blocking specifically. It is very, very common in female groups for righteous indignation to be fueled. So, if a woman is like, oh, like I was just treated this way at work or something like that, the typical appropriate female network response is, oh my gosh, I can't believe that, you've been so wronged, blah, blah, blah. I think while that's normative, it's also a maybe subconscious mate blocking tactic, because it ultimately leads to long-term disempowerment and increases the competitiveness of those who don't engage in that activity. So just like a woman might say, oh no, you're beautiful, when someone doesn't look very good in their group. No, don't change anything, because then they're ultimately better off competitively. I think this is something similar to that. And I think that you're more likely to see this kind of justification of an external locus of control in general, or of justified anger or victimization in female groups and in male groups. So they're just like, dude, you clearly weren't trying hard enough. Like, you deserve this, which is, it seems mean, but in the end is actually cooperative and benevolent behavior versus anti-competitive mate blocking behavior. Just throwing that out there.
So here's a Jung quote on the shadow. The shadow is a moral problem that challenges the whole ego personality, for no one can become conscious of the shadow without considerable effort. To become conscious of it involves recognizing the dark aspects of the personality as present and real. This act is the essential condition for any kind of self-knowledge. So he's doing here what cults often do, what Wu often does, where they try to frame the type of knowledge that they have of making you special and unique and more important than other people. Flatters the ego, right? Also, this feeling of like, I have this dark, mysterious thing inside me flatters the ego, right? And that's why it's so tempting to people, because it feels cool. Like it's cool in a movie context if all of this was true, if your life was a battle between some dark shadow living in your heart, you know what I mean? It's poetic. And a lot of his work was like about that. Like, how do we make the story better? So to be fast on these last steps, he had like psychological types where he goes into like extroversion, introversion, stuff like that. I think it's pretty boring. The central goal of his philosophy is individualization. Individualization is a lifelong process element towards wholeness, integrating consciousness and unconscious elements, differentiating the unique individual from the collective while connecting more deeply to the self. It involves confronting and assimilating the shadow, relating to the anima or animus, that's like your male or feminine, and transcending the persona. Not about becoming quote unquote perfect or ego inflated, but achieving balance, authentic personality. Often intensifies in midlife, the second half of life, shifting from adaptation to society towards inner meaning. And yeah, this is, I mean, you can see why I'd just be like, this is just all like a giant waste of time.
Yeah, seriously.
This stuff is manifested in your mental landscape by believing it. I really want to make this point. You can have anything. Here's an example, right? Even something totally stupid, like an Oedipus complex, right? That like women get jealous of their dads because their dads have a penis. Is that the Oedipus complex?
No, that's penis envy. You're referring, so an Oedipus complex is where the son wants to kill the father and
marry the mother. Okay, so
Mary.
Suppose you Oedipus complex, you're a normal person, you're like, this is stupid, this isn't a real thing.
Yeah.
But suppose somebody managed to convince you that the Oedipus complex was a 100% real thing. Now you would say, oh, well, I guess I have a secret desire to kill my dad and sleep with my mom, right? And you begin to build this into yourself because you now believe that this is real. And now this is something you have to deal with. This is why it is so critical that you don't do this. The craziest ideas out there, like, well, penis envy would be another one, right? Like a girl believes this. Now, all of a sudden, she experiences it to some extent because she sees what she now believes within herself. Right? The brain is, if you see our episode that we did recently on placebos,
yes,
they're incredibly powerful.
Or
right?
Or maybe exorcism is where we talk more about placebos.
Yes. You can build these things into yourself. You can build psychological illnesses into yourself. Okay. You can build all of these negative traits into yourself. You can build these challenges into yourself.
Mm-hmm. We even talked about this in our episode on Spoonies from way back.
Yeah, watch your Spoonies episode if you're a long time subscriber and you haven't seen it, because it's a good one, I think, and they're a useful thing to know about. We actually have 2 Spoonies episodes. We have one where we interviewed Barry Weiss's sister on it. Susie Weiss, yeah. Cool person. We should ask her back on now that
she's very busy and important now.
Oh, very busy and important, Mrs. Susie Weiss.
She is. I don't know you
CNN or whatever now.
Yeah, man. CBS. Yeah. Kind of a anyway. Go on.
Well, that's it. This is where we are. This is why I've talked about this.
We hate him.
This is why it's important to keep your mental models of how your brain works lean, and be first principles in how you construct them, because it is too easy to invent the problems that you're dealing with. And you can be like, well, I could just swear that I definitely do have this shadow self because it makes me cool and special and awesome. And, you don't have it because you just aren't thinking enough about yourself, right? And I'd point out, well, then why don't I deal with any negative consequences from not addressing it then? Right? Like, presumably, if I do secretly have it and I'm just not addressing it, Simone, you live with me 24/7, right? Do I have some like hidden dark side to my personality?
Well, it's not hidden.
What's the dark side then? What's the negative aspect to my personality? Come on,
You're just, I'm not going to say it on air. It's nothing you act on.
Oh, you mean the arousal pathway?
Yes.
That's not what we're talking about here.
Okay, well,
That's,
you were
that's
asking.
not caused by like a shadow self. That's something I fully admit.
Okay.
And it's one of these things that
Oh God.
like it's like not something that I'm even remotely embarrassed about, I should say, or that I would be particularly embarrassed about talking about. And I have even on the show hypothesized that it is unique to my demographic group. And the reason why I hypothesized that was both due to statistics around that social group, but also like there are other reasons I think it's genetic, but Simone had me remove this one.
God. Okay. Are you just going to say it? Or are you
No,
not
I'm not
going
going to say it. But
Okay.
the point being is basically just very extreme aggression.
Yes.
But that's not something I act on. It's not something that controls me. It's not something that.
No, but you're right. It's not a hidden part of your personality. So that's fair. There is no hidden part of you that is
That is no, but
freaking
so
weird.
what I'm
Or
asking
like
for
counter to your personality, which
is
I guess for you would be like, oh, you know what? I guess that this maybe shows up in these stereotypes of like men who are super powerful but need a dominatrix, that kind of thing. Do you think that's
No, I just think that's part of their sexuality. And like, you don't need to act on your sexuality. You don't need to obsess about your sexuality. You didn't choose your sexuality.
Yeah.
I think sexuality is just completely untied from really much else about you. It's just something that you randomly have, and it doesn't need to be a big part of your daily thoughts or anything like that, right? Like, it doesn't need to be part of your rituals. It doesn't need to be part of how you self-conceptualize. And by understanding this, you can free yourself from a lot of the negatives that might come with it, right? Like, oh, I should actually indulge in this. I should actually talk about this. But what I'm talking about, Simone, is what somebody would say is you don't address your shadow. And if you don't address your shadow, that you're going to like have outbursts at people, or you're going to be secretly cruel to people, or you're going to, be greedy or selfish, and so what I'm asking you is in those types of things, the types of things people think that the shadow actually manifests. Do you see that behavior from me like ever?
No.
And Simone, you haven't tried to address some shadow in yourself, have you?
No.
Okay, so I will say, as somebody married to Simone, she has no negative traits. She has
Malcolm.
You have some eccentricities, like not liking being touched when you're eating, but that again is something that's a random biologically inherited thing that has nothing to do with who you are as a person, and you harness it insofar that it doesn't come out in any way that is societally not useful.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that.
No,
I think in the end, like, it's just really bad. Anything that helps you develop an external locus of control and anything that has you overthinking stuff or getting too far up into your head, not good. Just try it.
And I'll note here, something that is really bad that can happen is when you don't accept your biological realities and you assume that they're because of like a shadow self, you can end up going on these like endless side quests. You are uncertain like in Simone's case, you don't know why you don't like, you want to measure all your food, and you don't like being touched when you're eating, and you have other sensory issues.
Mhm.
And instead of just accepting, like, I'm like autistic, my brain is put together differently, you say, oh, it's because I have an unresolved trauma somewhere in my life that I'm just going to dig at, right? Pick at.
Yeah.
And that allows you to create, because you're never actually going to address this thing, because it's just part of who you are. You end up creating this giant statue of the shadow in your mind, and it ends up actually having negative effects. Or and you see this a lot in, like, like a conservative individual who doesn't understand why they deal with same-sex attraction. They just happen to be born with some same-sex attraction. And again, the reason I say that it's likely something you're born with, or you get through parasites, see our episode on that, is because, like, I would admit to you if I felt an ounce of same-sex attraction, and I don't. I get quite a disgust reaction to that stuff. And it's not because I was trained to, because I wasn't trained to be aroused by some of the things that arouse me, right? Like, it's just not part of my biology. If I then go on some deep quest about, like, what happened in my childhood that made me X way, I'm going to end up obsessing over that.
Yeah. Fair.
And then I end up building a shadow, and then it never goes away, because it had nothing to do with a shadow. It had nothing to do with any of that. It was just a random roll of the cards that I didn't need to make an important part of myself, that I didn't need to act on, that I didn't need to indulge in. Anyway.
Screw Jung. I love you.
I love you too. And you are an amazing woman.
You're an amazing husband and man. Which one do you want to do next?
Whichever one you want.
Let's do mine. Here's a taste of Octavian's sense of humor, by the way. I was just bantering with him and talking, because we measured the boys again this morning against the door. And I was like, yeah, Octavian, someday you'll be taller than me. And I think he just thinks that humans just grow indefinitely, like that I'll grow too. But this wasn't apparent to me when he decided to crack what he thought was a joke. And he's like, oh yeah, because you'll be dead. Ha ha ha. Get it? You'll be dead. He just kept saying that. And I was like, okay. Thanks.
Now that we've explained to him that all humans die, he just thinks it's hilarious.
Yeah.
He's like,
Can I have your YouTube plaque when you're dead? That's like that, and he'll miss our house. That's kind of.
Did he ask for the YouTube plaque this time?
No, he's kind of forgotten about that for a while. I guess he just gave up on us.
We haven't even won that yet. This is just assuming
he's preemptively hoping for it.
We get to 100K, so please subscribe
for our child, for when we die. Yes.
So
maybe this is the only time someone has asked for a subscribe for that. Please subscribe, because our son wants us to die and then to take the plaque. So have pity on this orphan.
So what is it that I wanted to say? Yeah. So in relation to the Tucker episode, new conspiracy theory dropped, where somebody in the comments was like, it's really weird how whenever somebody starts to question the Jews or Israel, 2-3 years later, they're just completely crazy. Like every time, right? No matter how sane they were to begin with, like Tucker Carlson.
Yeah.
And my take on this is that Mossad secretly is poisoning people as soon as they ask any questions about Israel, so that they go crazy.
It's like a Mad Hatter kind of situation. They're getting like lead laced,
like mercury
hats.
or something. Yeah, lead or something. And then they go crazy, like Candace Owens, that somehow made her more famous to go crazy.
I know, they're like, this backfired terribly. What have we done?
Backfired terribly. I actually wonder about a full episode on that, trying to draw like, okay, let's assume this program is real.
How would they do it?
How are they administering the poison? What would be a good long-term poison to cause these effects in people?
Yeah, it would need. What? Because I mean, the way that Tucker Carlson has gone off the rails is different from the way that Nick Fuentes and Candace Owens have gone off the rails, which I think is the biggest refutation of this conspiracy theory. Because if they were all acting schizophrenic like Candace Owens, who's connecting dots where there are no connections, it's very different from the way that Tucker Carlson is going off the rails, which is basically just favoring the views of everyone who's not American, or being sort of a weather vane of those around him. And it just happens to be chic for elite Americans to hate America and chic for people in the Middle East and Japan to like their
I don't know. I
countries.
mean, he said some pretty crazy stuff. Actually, you can even look at this historically. You can argue that Hitler ended up going crazy, right? You could argue that.
Well, come on. We knew that was all the methamphetamines and everything else. He was blitzed.
What if engaging in any form of anti-Semitism actually does just make you go crazy? Like, what if they're God's favored people, and so if you decide
it's God smiting them, it's not
God smiting them with madness.
Yeah, maybe
and
it's
I
just
can try to
God.
trace it through history. Has God been smiting anyone who attacks the Jews with madness?
Yeah, starting with Pharaoh.
Well, you could go over Roman emperors because
Yeah.
a lot of Roman emperors were both mad and targeted the Jews. The question is, does that overlap?
Yeah, and we're the pro-Jew ones, if there were any, less crazy.
Very interesting question.
Who knows?
Actually, yeah, I'm feeling a whole episode form here, Simone.
Oh boy. Oh no.
Oh boy.
Oh no.
You call him Titan?
I think you call it the finger.
What do you call Titan? What do you call him?
I call him
Is he pink?
Yeah.
What else do you call him?
Pink is an ugly color. Pink is an ugly
Titan, do you think pink is an ugly color?
No. It's just a cool color. I think pink is an ugly color.
Was that because you're a boy, Octavian?
Yes. And boys hate pink. What are you doing, girl? And boys.
Did you know, Octavian, pink used to be the color for little boys?
Yeah.
It was.
My two favorite.
Octavian, I want to tell you something very scary.
What?
There is a type of person out there who wants to make you into a girl. No, Octavian. This isn't a joke. This is real. There is a type of bad person out there that wants to turn you into a girl.
Like me.
Yeah.
I want to shoot him in the head.
Well, that might be a little intense,
And
Octavian.
eat him for dinner.
You want to kill him and eat him.
His meat.
But what part of the body do we not eat?
Yeah, Octavian, what's the rule?
What part of the body?
No harm.
No.
No, hearts are fine.
No. Come on, I've told you this so many times. What part do we not eat?
The lungs.
No.
The skin.
No.
This is really hard.
The brain!
We never eat brain.
Because you can get prion diseases and die.
Yeah, very dangerous. It's fine to eat everything else, not the brain.
I have to make the video.
Stop it, buddy.
I own that. I own that. And I own you. And I own the villain.
Nice try.
Whoa.
Do you see what I have here? There's slippers.
Yes. She's being like, ow, that hurt. Got a leech on me. You okay, buddy?
There's gonna be a giant ship.
Or are they gonna blow something up?
Look! A giant ship!
Wow.
And it's maxed out!
Titan. Did you know that there's people out there who want to turn you into a boy?
No. They turned me into a girl.
Oh no, they're mean people who want to turn you into a boy.
No, they wanted to turn me into a girl.
No, because you already are a girl. Watch out! You're gonna knock that over. Octavian, you're in trouble. You're not paying attention. But you do need to be careful because they did this to one of our friends' kids, Octavian.
Actually, multiple friends.
Multiple friends' kids.
No! Hurry! That one's gonna turn on!
Octavian, do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
So one of our friends, hold on, listen. They took their little boy and they turned him into a girl.
Why?
Why? Because they tricked him.
Oh, what the?
Oh yeah.
I want to kill it.
And you know what they did? They cut off his flippy.
What?
This is real.
Did they turn him into an animal?
Kind of, yeah.
It's helicopters on modern
Why do I like this? It's helicopters. I love helicopters.
And then they got very sad, and you want to hear something crazy? They didn't like their mommy and daddy anymore.
helicopters.
Why?
Our skies are full of them. Unlike air
Because that's what these people do. They make you hate your mommy and daddy, and they make you a girl.
just hover in one spot.
I want to kill them.
And when this ability is
You
combined
probably
with
shouldn't
visual
just like
firepower,
immediately kill
you
them.
get the AH-64D Apache longbow,
Because then
the deadliest helicopter in the world.
they'll say that, I don't know, you're overly aggressive or something.
They train
And I would kill all of them. And I would kill all of the people who said that.
Primarily an attack helicopter.
And even the people who want to kill us.
Primary mission is to attack.
Okay.
And even the camera. I own the viewers. I own the viewers.
Octavian, don't say that. They'll think that's
I own
mean.
the viewers.
Say you want them to like and subscribe and you like them, not that you own them.
I want them to like and subscribe. And I want them to see me. And I want to
Laser guided anti-tank missiles.
own them. So, because they are me and I own them.
Depending on the